us, so we'll just make it a slow start. So hi, I'm Sylvie Frigon. I'm the Vice Dean of Graduate Studies at the Faculty of Social Science, and we have Terry Kruk here, our administrator at the graduate level as well, and we have some people on the call to help you with some of your questions. If you don't mind, we'll be recording this session, so if you do not wish to be on this recording, please advise us. But it's for everyone, so because some people cannot be here today, and we did it last year and it was very important to do that. And also, we're doing this virtually, but we have in-person service. So you can come, of course, to our office in person to meet with us if you have questions on this or on other matters. I'll let Terry continue on some of the important information to give you.
Okay. So as Sylvie mentioned, there's going to be some people from my team that are on the call, and they'll be able to answer questions in the chat as we go forward. Our presentation is pretty all-encompassing, so maybe if it's not answered right away, it might get answered in 1 or 2 slides. So be patient. I think we'll answer a lot of the questions, but if it's something on the particular slide that you want clarification, the team will either answer the question on the spot, or they'll just flag it for myself to answer it at the end. It's difficult to see the chat at the same time as the presentation. We do like to make it a little disclaimer that we've done the best that we can to make sure that we have the most accurate, up-to-date information. These are provincial and federal funding agencies that we're talking about today. And whenever you're dealing with the government, sometimes they change their rules at any point. So we do encourage you to validate the information with those funding agencies' web pages when you're applying, to make sure that their information is accurate, because they will have the most up-to-date information. And we've already talked about the recording. And it's just a reminder, if you're on the call, if you can please mute your microphone to make sure that we don't have any distracting noises. And then we're just going to get started with this PowerPoint. And to anticipate the question, the recording will be shared, but also the PowerPoint to anybody who received the invitation. So that should happen, I want to say by this week, but I'll hedge my bets and say by early next week at the latest. So I'm just going to get the presentation, which is not working for me again. And then we'll start with our presentation. There we go.
We'll be starting while Terry is putting the PowerPoint, yes, there. So I'm very happy to be here today, and I hope this session will be important for you and useful. Just a small anecdote. I was at a reception last week, and a student told me that he got Shirk and he participated in this workshop, and it was very useful for him. So, I think, our first slide is why bother? Well, of course, there's no promise of success, and it's a lot of work to be applying for external funding. But, it's really important to do it for various reasons. First of all, if you're successful, you get tuition relief that's going to be really helpful, and is going to be helping you in terms of completing your thesis and coursework in due course. Also, it's always a good exercise, and that's what I've been doing with my students in the last 29 years, is to write up those research proposals. Even if you're not successful, it is always important, because you're able to kind of zoom in on things you want to talk about, make things clearer, because when you're really close to your subject, for you it's clear, but for somebody else outside of your field, and even in your field, it might not be as clear. So it's really competitive. It is not a promise of success if you apply for this funding, but if you do apply, it's really a good exercise. And, there's no way about it. If you don't apply, you don't have a chance. So go for it.
The microphone. So we're going to go through the various options that are being available. So I want to preface this by saying 2 things. So there is federal and provincial funding options. I'll go through the different ones. The federal funding ones are only available to Canadian residents. So oftentimes the students will ask which ones are available to internationals. There is one, the Ontario Graduate Scholarships is available to internationals, and it's a separate competition. And I'll explain to you the competitiveness of that program and how many applications that we normally get. But the first one with the federal agencies, the three councils, is only available to Canadian residents. So I'll go through the different options, but the first one will be just for Canadian residents. And then some students might be wondering, why was I invited? I'm in the 4th year of my bachelor's program. So these scholarships are for next year. So if you're thinking about doing master's here or in another faculty, you got to start thinking about these external fundings because these supplement the admission scholarships. So these are tenable either in May 2023, September 2023, or January 2024. So if you're finishing your 4th year this year and you're thinking maybe next fall or next winter I'd like to start, to be eligible for these fundings, you would have to apply now. So I'm going to start off with the three councils. See, these are the federal ones. So there's the Shirk, the SSHRC, the CIHR, and the NSERC. So these are federal funding grants. They are the most prestigious ones that we mostly handle. There's some other more prestigious ones, but those are more of the university competition or external competitions. But the ones that we manage through the faculty are the PhD federal ones. So, or sorry, the federal three council ones. So it's the Shirk, which is for Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council. CIHR is more health related, which in our faculty is mostly usually around psychology students usually apply, but sometimes other departments might have one or two students who apply. And then the NSERC, again, we see mostly psychology students that apply, but the grand majority of our students will apply to the Shirk funding agency, the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council. Typically, to know which funding agency to apply for at the federal level is usually in line with your supervisor or your potential supervisor for the master's to see what funding they have and what's financing their research. So if you're in psychology and you have a CIHR professor, then you'll likely also apply for the CIHR scholarship. So at the master's level, and these competitions are separate, and we'll go into the breakdowns of how they work. But for the master's, the value of a federal agency fund, it's $17,500 for 1 year. So we're talking about some serious money. And at the PhD, it varies between the different agencies. Most of them have at least a $35,000 one, and then the SSHRC has a $20,000 or $35,000 option. It is determined by the council when they are doing the selection. When you apply, you theoretically apply for both by default if you're eligible for both, and then they'll assign one or the other depending on their selection. So those three, the Shirk, the CIHR, and the NSERC are federal funding scholarships. There are some funding at the provincial level. So the OGS, the Ontario Graduate Scholarships, is a competition that's for the master's and doctoral scholarships. So the university gets a quota and our faculty gets a quota, and it's a competition with all our master's and PhD students who apply that it's considered at the same time. There is one Canadian competition where we get about 200 applications, and we usually get about 55 to 60 scholarships. And then there's a university-wide international scholarship. Now, the last few years, the governments have cut back the amount of scholarships available to international students. So university-wide, there's approximately 7 scholarships, and we typically can nominate approximately 4 international students for those scholarships. Now, we have had varying success over the years of getting this scholarship. There has been some years where the faculty has gotten 0 of those scholarships, but however, this past year we were successful in getting 2 out of those 7 scholarships in the university competition. So for the international one, it's a bit more competitive, a lot more competitive, but it is not completely impossible. So for the Ontario Graduate Scholarship, it is a $15,000 scholarship. And it's for 1 year, so you'd have to apply every other year if you want to continue holding it and if you're continue to be eligible for holding it. So just to note, typically students will apply both for the Ontario Graduate Student Scholarship and one of the federal funded scholarship. If you're successful in both, you will have to choose between one or the other. Typically, a student will choose the federally funded option because A, it's more money, and B, it's a bit more prestigious being a federally funded scholarship. I did not add a mention of the FQRSC, so it is the Quebec government's equivalent of the OGS, the Ontario Graduate Scholarship. So Quebec does have one. To be eligible for that, you need to be a resident of Quebec. So if you're a resident of Quebec attending the University of Ottawa, as long as you still have a valid health card, you're still considered as an eligible Quebecer. You can apply for the FQRSC, and we'll provide the links at a later slide of how to apply. And it doesn't prevent you to apply to the OGS because you're attending an Ontario university. So you can apply for both. And as long as you don't get one of the federally funded one, you should, and that's what it's been in the past, should be able to hold both the Ontario Graduate Scholarship and the FQRSC. Now, we have heard recently that there has been some issues around holding both, and they do make you choose, but we're still waiting for clarity on that. So we will provide the link and the dates for those scholarships for the FQRSC. That one, to the best of our knowledge, is only available for Quebec residents. It does, I believe it does exclude international students, and it is one of those scholarships that is completely managed by the Quebec government, so we are not involved in any steps of the process. So we have limited information, but we'll provide you the resources of how to connect with them. And if you're struggling to get answers, we do have some contacts that we can reach out to, but it's not as direct as we do have with the other scholarships that we've just mentioned. So the key thing is to take note of the important dates. I know having a presentation on scholarships the second week of the school year might seem like, oh, this is too much information too soon, but especially at the PhD level, the deadlines are fast approaching, and especially at the master's level, the Quebec FRQSC is fast approaching. So we want to make sure that you guys have ample time to prepare your presentations or your applications, because some of these can be time consuming with some of the steps that are required. So we'll just go through the master's dates. So for the CGSM, sorry, that's my short form for the federal funding agency. So the SSHRC, the CIHR, and the NSERC, that deadline for the masters is on December 1st. The Master's Ontario Graduate Scholarships deadline is December 1st as well. And then the FRQSC, so the equivalent to the Ontario Graduate Scholarships for the Masters, is October 5th for the FRQSC. So that date for that Masters for Quebec residents is fast approaching. I did forget to mention that there is a special clause for those who have lived 2 years in Quebec. So I'm thinking maybe there's some current bachelor students, or maybe some PhD students who have lived the last 2 years in Quebec. They may technically be eligible for the FRQSC. So if you've lived in Gatineau the last 2 years and been coming into campus, you might still technically be eligible for this scholarship. A lot of times people look at the guidelines for this scholarship and will say, well, you need to identify the university in Quebec that you're attending. We do have an exemption as the University of Ottawa to be considered within this competition. So we are there. So please do take a look at that. So the deadline for the SSHRC, the Shirk, is it falls into the CGSM category. So the Shirk, the CIHR, and the NSERCs are lumped into the CGSM. So that deadline for the masters is December 1st. Now moving on to the PhD scholarships. So the Shirk PhD, the CIHR PhD, and the NSERC PhD all have a deadline of October 17th, 2022. So that's fast approaching. So that's just a little over a month. So these competitions are fast, have an earlier deadline because we do not receive a quota internally. So we have a nomination quota, but once we do our recommendations, it then goes to a national competition. So that's why it has an earlier date. For the Masters one, for the Shirk Masters, the CGSM competition, and the OGS, we get allocated a specific amount of scholarships. So that's why we have a later date, because we make the final decisions. But for the PhD, Shirk scholarships, CIHR scholarships, and NSERC scholarships, they have an October 17th deadline, because we then have to go through a ranking process to then provide some nominations to the National Council. I am seeing some questions popping up. I'm good sometimes to answer the chats. If my team can't answer it, I will answer it at the end, or if I have a pause during the presentation, I'll try to see if I can answer some questions throughout the presentation. OGS for the PhD is the same deadline as the master's. So it is December 1st. The competition, the master's and the PhD get considered at the same time, and they get evaluated together. And the FRQSC for the PhD level has a slightly later deadline. It is 1 week later, and again, that's fast approaching, and it's completely handled by the Quebec government. And I'll explain how the applications get processed. So the key things, as I mentioned earlier with the OGS scholarship, it's available. There's 2 competitions. There's one for the Canadians and permanent residents, where we do have a significant amount of scholarships. A lot of our students do get this one. We have about, last year we had 56, I think, given to us. And then there is a separate competition for international students where we do not have a guaranteed allocation, but we could typically nominate 4 students. We usually get 20 something applications, and we can nominate 4 to the university-wide competition. This one is extremely competitive and for the international students. Key things for these scholarships is they all have their own individual particularities. That's why we were given the disclaimer. Sometimes they change these informations mid-route, but to the best of our knowledge, this is the most up-to-date information. So for the OGS, you need to be able to take this scholarship within a master's program either in spring 2023, fall 2023, or winter 2024. So if you're thinking of fall 2024, you have to wait till next year's competition. So it's very important of when you're planning on doing your master's scholarships. For those who are currently in a master's program or a PhD program, it's very important to pay attention to the amount of months completed in the program. Now, these get tricky really quickly. I did see that's a question. So we will be providing the PowerPoint, and we will be providing the recording probably early next week of these things. So you could try to take as many notes as you want, but we will be sharing the recording and the PowerPoint. So for the master's program, some of the wording does confuse some of our students, and it confuses us at times as well. It gets very bureaucratic jargon as well. So for the master's, by the time you're taking the scholarships, you cannot have completed more than 4 terms of their master's program at the time that the award is dispersed. So the earliest the award could be dispersed is spring 2023. So anybody who started their master's since winter 2022 would theoretically be eligible, because if you've completed winter 2022, spring 2022, fall 2022, and winter 2023, you've only completed 4 terms. You have not completed more than 4 terms. And sometimes people think they're not eligible when they are eligible. And same thing for the PhD, you cannot have completed more than 13 terms. So technically, anybody who started since winter 2019 in the PhD should be eligible. Those who have started before and have had some approved leave of absence may still be eligible, but we strongly encourage, if you have doubts about how many semesters have been counted towards your eligibility, to verify with our office. We'll be providing our generic email address, because some of these applications do take a lot of hours to complete, and we would hate to see that you were disqualified on a technicality. Sometimes people struggle to interpret this bureaucratic terminology. That's what we're here for, to help you with. We can help you in person. We can help you via phone. We can help you through Teams. With Teams, it's great. We can share the screens, but come on into our office. We're glad to see so many people on campus, and we'll be glad to help you as well. But if you have doubts about your eligibility for terms, please come speak with us, because they use different wordings between the different funding agencies, and it could get confusing. I only see half of that question, so I'll have to get back to that question that just got posted in the chat if someone can answer it in the chat. The other aspect to consider for the OGS is there is a requirement for a minimum average. Now, they do have a weird rule in terms of the way the average is calculated, and we've got some slides coming up that will show it more visibly, but I want to really reinforce this message. They look for those who have done less than 24 months in a master's program or any graduate studies. They look at the last 2 full years as separate entities. So if you're just entering the master's next year, they'll look at your 4th year grades and your 3rd year grades, and both of those need to be above 8.0 when calculated. It cannot be like this year, the 4th year was a 9.0 and this was a 7.0. Combined, they make an 8.0. Each of the last 2 years both need to be above 8.0. Now, you guys have taken the first step of being proactive in terms of these scholarships by reaching out to us. If you have doubts of your average, you can reach out to us earlier on in the application process so we can take a look. and we can go through your transcripts to take a look. Obviously, if you have straight A pluses or straight A's, you're eligible. You don't need to check with me. But if you've got like one bad semester that seems to be pulling down your weight and you're not sure, it'd be our pleasure. Obviously, if you're waiting closer to the deadline of December 1st, if you reach out to us November 29th, we get about 200 applications usually, and a lot of them come in last minute. We might not be able to do a calculation. The more proactive you are, the more we're able to accompany you in this process. The different factor with the I gotta block this chat. I keep getting distracted. Sorry. For those who have been more than 24 months in the program in graduate studies, the calculation is done a bit differently. In those instances, they only take all the graduate courses, and that combined average needs to be above 8.0. So if you've done less than 24 months in the graduate studies, we take a look at the last 2 years as separate entities, and both those years need to be above 8.0. If you've done more than 24 months of graduate studies, they take all your graduate studies courses that you've ever taken, and that average needs to be above 8.0. In terms of Shirk, any of the three councils, the federal grants, the CGSMs or the CGSDs, so the SSHRC, the CIHR, the NSERC, is only available for Canadian residents. In terms of the PhD one that we're going to focus on right now, you need to be pursuing doctoral studies in the social sciences or humanities. Again, you need to check with your current supervisor, your potential supervisor, to see where their funding is coming from. Because if your research is going to complement theirs, then you should probably be funded by the same funding agencies. You cannot submit more than one scholarship application per academic year. So if maybe you have a co-supervisor that is funded by the sciences and one that's funded by the social sciences, you have to pick which one you're going to want to be funding for. You can't just apply for all three federal agencies. You will be disqualified. So you do need to make sure that you're applying for the first one. So there is nothing preventing you from applying for the provincial one, the Ontario Graduate Scholarships, and the federal, one of the federal ones. You just can't apply to two federal ones. So that's a very important thing. In the majority of our students apply for the social science PhD one, and there's two different eligibilities. The key thing is that you need to at least be eligible for one of the two. So if you're eligible for one of the two, you'll be automatically pushed through. If you don't meet any of their eligibilities for the amount of terms completed, then you'll be automatically disqualified. But if you're at least eligible for one of the two or both, then you'll be considered for the ones that you're eligible for. In terms of the masters, it follows similar lines. You can only apply for one of the funding agencies, and it's respecting as well the amount of semesters completed. One key distinction that does come to confusion, and especially in the way it's explained on the Shirk portals or even the NSERC or the CIHR portals, the federal agencies, is we have a special program in terms of the psychology master's program. It is a combined master's PhD. So there is an automatic transfer, assuming you're in good standing from the master's to the PhD at the end of the first year. What students might not realize is that because you can take this scholarship in the spring at the end of your first year, those who have started this fall are still eligible for applying for the master's federal agency fundings. So those who are applying to psychology next year and want to apply for the external funding, you are applying to the master's program scholarship, and you're looking to try to apply for the Shirk or the CIHR, the NSERC at the master's level. Those who have just started this past fall in psychology and will be transferring to the PhD next fall, it has always been strongly encouraged that you apply for the master's level because you can take it as of spring 2023, and it is transferable into your PhD level, which just gives you extra eligibility for the PhD funding in the future if you apply and you're successful in obtaining it. So this is just a particularity for the MA PhD of psychology that you are eligible. Otherwise, again, it's anybody who started in winter 2022 is eligible for this scholarship or later, because you have to take it within you cannot have completed more than 4 semesters at the point of as of December 31st. So that's just an overview of the scholarships. We're going to go into more details of how they're evaluated. Sorry, that's twice today that I've done this with this slide. I've gotten ahead of myself, but this is just recapping that master's, first year's MA PhD psychology students who have just started this past fall are still eligible for the master's three council funding agencies applications.
Thank you, Terry. That's a lot of information. So we'll take a little breather. Don't worry. Probably you have a lot of questions and you can contact us. So, you know, I'm sure you have a lot of questions, but thank you, Terry, for all this really important information. Okay, so getting started in terms of writing up your proposal. So earlier is always better. Please, please write several drafts of your application. And also, if you are going to be contacting your supervisor to have her or him read your stuff, please do it in advance, you know, because we're all busy. If you send me your proposal on Thursday and you say it has to be in by Tuesday, that won't work very well. So please take your time and do it in advance, okay? So if you're in the PhD program, for example, don't assume you just use your letter you wrote to get accepted in the program, because your proposal will be sent to a different audience, an audience which is outside of your field. So this is why it's important to rewrite your stuff in a way. And also, I would say, in terms of writing your project, just exercise. You know, you can write an abstract form about 200 words, and of course, you'll be writing it many times. And you should have other people read it, because if you're in your field, you know what you're talking about. It's clear for you. But if I read it, somebody else reads it, then we might say, well, that's not clear. We don't understand this. And what's really interesting is to pay attention to events around the world, around you on your topic, because that could be important to write up also. It helps to grab the reader, of course, related to your subject. So contact your referees as soon as possible, because you want to have the best referees for you who are available, and give them a chance to read and comment on your application. And double and triple check the deadlines, okay? Because you might think, oh, that's that date, and then you find, oops, it's a bit different, okay? So what's in an application, okay? So there's the application form that you have access to, the web-based Shirk awards, okay? So there's the program information, area of study, research proposal, maximum 2 pages. That's really important, the research proposal. Bibliography citations, allowable inclusions, research contributions. Here it's important, your research contributions, relevant experience and activities, because we want to know why you're the best person to be doing this, or, you know, so that's important to talk about this. Supplement and or joint or special initiative justification. Official letter from the registrar to say that you're what's your status. All up-to-date official transcripts. Jean-Sylvain Gauthier. Sorry about that. So official letters and all up-to-date official transcripts of your studies, letters of appraisal. So you have to get those in advance and give people time to be doing those letters. Evaluation criteria. So as I said, when you're writing up your proposal, you have to realize that you're going to be talking to a multidisciplinary selection committee, and they will be looking at your academic merit. So the past academic results as demonstrated by transcripts, awards, and distinctions, the program of study and its potential contribution to the advancement of knowledge, relevant professional and academic experience. You know, again, that's important. What's your experience, your research training, as demonstrated by conference presentations, scholarly publications, and of course, the 2 written evaluations from referees. So Terry, and on the evaluation process of the OGS.
Yeah, so we just wanted to give you an overview of what happens once you apply, just so you get a sense of how it gets evaluated. Um, I did not seem to change this typo from this morning either. So the first part is that, for the OGS, there's going to be an internal portal. Fluid Review is our old portal, and it is gone the way of the dinosaur. So we are getting a new portal this year. We have yet to be informed of the name of it. Typically, the application portal opens early October, and you'll receive an email just explaining, okay, the OGS competition is open and you can apply through this portal. So it is something that is managed completely in-house. We receive a quota from the government, and we're then able to distribute scholarships accordingly. So there'll be an internal portal to the University of Ottawa where you can apply. And the deadline again is December 1st. After that date, we start taking a look at the eligibility. So the key thing is we start calculating the averages to make sure that you have the 8.0 in each of the last 2 years, or if you've done more than 24 months of graduate studies, we make sure you have a global average of 8.0. We then also verify that to make sure that you have the proper amount of semesters completed. So what typically happens is by early January, we're done this process and we start advising those students who are ineligible. Now we are very diligent in trying to make sure that when we're going through 200, 250 applications to make sure we've not made any mistakes. We usually double, triple check anybody who's ineligible. But at that point, when we are sending that email of ineligibility, we also leave it available for you to reach out to us if you feel like there's something you don't understand, or if we're missing some information, or if we may have made an error. We send those emails at the time because we still have time to include your file into the evaluation in the event that there was an error, because we will then send the files to the departmental committees for the initial ranking, and then it goes to faculty committee ranking. So we are strategic in when we send out these notices so that we have time to correct any errors that may have happened in rendering a file ineligible. So that's the first step, is our office takes a look at eligibility. We then send the departments their files to do an internal ranking based on the criteria that we'll discuss later. So each department does a ranking of the files of students that are currently in their department or prospective students. Once we receive all the departmental ranking, there is a faculty committee that comes up with our global ranking. Typically, it respects the order that the departments has ranked you in, and then it just classes you within all the other departments of the faculty so that we have a global ranking list. For the OGS, we typically have a ranking of 1 to 206 this past year when we had eligible files, and we have about 56 scholarships, so we have a very detailed ranking. Then once we get our quota, we then send it to the university and they start notifying students of their scholarships. Typically, it gets announced in mid-April after the federal funding scholarships has been offered. The reason it happens afterwards is because you cannot hold an Ontario graduate scholarship at the same time of holding a Shirk at the federal level. So as people start accepting the Shirk scholarships, you'll be removed from the OGS list because obviously the Shirk is worth more. So typically, even though we had 206 eligible applications, a lot of our students at the top of our OGS list was also at the top of our Shirk list. So we went much further down into the list of scholarships. So OGS does end up rewarding a lot of students. And then, so yeah, for ineligible files, we usually notify you guys in early January if you're ineligible so that we have an opportunity to correct it in the event that there's a mistake. And typically the email does come on my behalf, and I do meet with students if they disagree with it to see if there's a misunderstanding or just to better explain the rule. To be clear, these are rules that are set out by the funding agencies. We are tied to them. We cannot use judgment or modify them accordingly because we do get audited. So we have to respect it to the letter, their rules and regulations that they've developed. In terms of Shirk, the Shirk PhD, so any of the federal agencies, the PhD works one way and different than the master's. So I'm going to start off with the PhD level. So for the federal funding agencies at the PhD level, typically after the application deadline of October 17th. So they do have their own portal. Each funding agency has their own portal. So you apply through them. After the deadline, we receive their applications. Again, we take a look at eligibility. For for the Shirk PhD or the CIHR PhD or NSERC PhD, the federal funding agency, there is no average at the PhD level. So it's really focusing more on research potential and research publications and stuff. So when we get the files on October 17th, typically we're making sure that the file is complete and the number of semesters completed in the program renders you eligible for these scholarships. We then do a departmental ranking and we then do a faculty ranking. Now with these federal funding agency scholarships, we do not have a guaranteed allocation. What we do have is a quota to nominate to the national competition. So typically for Shirk last year, which is our most popular, we had 80 applications and we were allowed to nominate 43 to the national competition. We then only received 18 scholarships. We received between 15 and 20 in a given year based on our nominations, but there's a lot of fluctuations in the last few years. Even the research funding has been, our quotas have diminished university-wide. And some of the NSERC and the CIHR have smaller numbers in terms of applications and how many we can nominate to the competition. So then usually around April 1st, which is the most random date to get an email saying you've gotten a big scholarship on April Fool's Day, but typically they will announce their federally funding grants on April 1st for the PhD. In terms of the masters for the SSHRC, the CIHR, the NSERC, we do get an allocation internally. So for each of those competitions, we typically get an allocation. For the Shirk Masters last year, we received 31 scholarships for 73 applications. So again, it goes through the departmental ranking. So you apply through the Shirk portal for the Masters as well. Each funding agency has their own portal. It gets transferred to us. We validate the eligibility. Then we do a departmental ranking. And then the faculty committee will merge the departmental ranking while respecting the individual department's orders to then get a global ranking for the faculty. And we then go based on the amount of scholarships that we receive in a given year. There is some fluctuations, but for the CRSH, we do have the most applications, so we typically get the most scholarships for that competition. For the other two, CIHR and NSERC, because medicine and science and engineering do get a lot of applications for those, we do have fewer scholarships in those. So yeah. All right, average calculations. There's been a lot of changes with average calculations, and there's often a lot of confusion with students. We try to be as transparent as possible. We've added this slide the last year in the presentation. Before that, we didn't have a slide on the calculations. People try to do the calculations on their own. Like I said, if you have like some weaker grades in certain semesters and you're unsure, please take the time to come see us, and it'll be our pleasure to take a quick look. Usually I can take a quick look at a transcript and I could tell you yes or no within 2 minutes, but I'll run it through the calculator and I'll tell you yes or no. So the first example is a U Ottawa system. So it's not helpful to say there's a link here, but you will get the PowerPoint with the link. But if you type in grade scale U Ottawa, you'll see how our grades are typically converted to a numerical grade. So each of the last 2 years need to be above 8.0. So in the example here, one of the years the student has an 8.5 and the other year is 7.9. So the average of those two would be 8.3. But because the rules set out by OGS and the federal funding agencies, both of those individual years for students who have less than 24 months of graduate studies need to be above 8.0. So even with the 7.9, I cannot round it to an 8.0, and unfortunately this file would be ineligible. So if you have doubts about your average, a U Ottawa student, it's pretty straightforward to try to calculate your average. Where it gets confusing, I'll explain some special situations, is if the weight of the credits change. It's like a 6-credit course you count that grade twice. So it's making sure that you take a look at it. It's just, if you're on the borderline, if you got an 8.1 and an 8.0, I'd encourage you to check with us before you start spending countless hours on the applications to make sure that you didn't make an arithmetic error. We have special tools to do these calculations, and we can take a look at that. Now, there are changes to the way other university grades are calculated. So all those other universities, whether Canadian universities or international universities, they do get converted to our system. Now, I wanted to try to find a way to easily explain this to everyone, but there is no easy way to explain it. I will show you this graphic that's very confusing, but again, if you've got A pluses in another institution, you should be fine. If you've got if your average is a borderline, please come see with us so to make sure that you're eligible. So sorry if I'm going to overwhelm you with the next slide. So I will try to explain to you globally how this works. I wrote myself a note to see if I could try to explain it, but this is a new system as of this year. We do have a tool that makes it super simple to calculate the average, but we're trying to be transparent to explain to you how these average works. So it takes the average of your grades. So let's say, I believe this example is the University of Montreal. So I think they have numerical values where their letters are associated on a scale of 4.3. So here's the scale that it shows you an A plus there is worth of 4.3. So then it multiplies it by the credits. So the different credits have different ways. So what happened in the past was we used to convert each individual grade to the U Ottawa grade scale. And then the sum of that, we would then convert again to the U Ottawa grade scale. It was to the disadvantage of the student because we'd be double converting. What this does is it takes your average of each of the last 2 years, the cumulative average as a whole, and only converts that cumulative average into the U Ottawa grade scale. So it's a single conversion. It is very complex in trying to do your own calculation. Again, A pluses, you're fine. But if you're on the doubt, and especially some of the international institutions, a lot of the Canadian universities have similar grade scales, but depending on some countries, the international experts that have helped us do these conversion scales, there are different weights that aren't necessarily intuitive. So it's very important to validate with us. So again, each individual grade is converted, is multiplied by the amount of credits to give a sum total. Here in this case is 139.80, and it's divided by the credits to give the average for that year, which is then converted to U Ottawa grade scale. The issues we've had in the past is, well, I had an 80 at my university, that must be equal to an 8.0. I'm eligible. It does not necessarily work that way. So we encourage you, we don't expect you, but we encourage you to check with us if you have any doubt. So the main contact, a lot of times people see my name in this presentation and they think, oh, I'm just going to email Terry, he'll answer all my questions. I'll be providing the email address at the end, but it is scsgrad@uottawa.ca. Sylvia and I are the face of this presentation, but we have a lot of people in our offices that are working on these files, and they do a lot of the calculations and stuff. So by emailing scsgrad@uottawa.ca, it is possible to get people to meet with you either by Teams or in person at FSS 3021, and we'll gladly meet with you and we can do a pre-calculation. Just because I saw this question pop in as I was explaining this, the grade calculator is not available online. It is something that the university is looking at doing. It's a complex tool that is not easily adaptable to student needs. I know some universities are doing it. We are looking into doing it. It is out of my control. It is something that the central of the university have developed, and we are just users of this tool. But unfortunately, it is not available to the students. But typically, if students have questions, I'll show them the equivalencies that are available. Like here, it's the University of Montreal. But if I will show the calculations as we do them, if there's a specific school that you want, and we can go through it together. And by the team will, because oftentimes I'm someone that's just in meetings, so I might not be able to meet you individually, but if you write to SCS Grad, they're very quick at responding, and we can set up meetings relatively quickly, assuming you're not waiting to the last minute in November. So that's a basic overview of average calculations. So U Ottawa one, if you've only taken 3 credit courses, you just take the U Ottawa grade scale and you're able to get a great idea of how your average is calculated. But if you've attended other universities, it could get complicated really quickly. So just key things to note. The grades from other institutions do have a conversion to the U Ottawa equivalent. Most Canadian institutions have a parallel system, but some institutions have like B minuses and that we don't have, and other grades that we might not have. So it's not as straightforward of conversion. There's some nuances in there that you need to take into consideration. That's why it's very important to consult us. I mentioned earlier, the amount of credits does have an impact. So a 6 credit course is like counting the A or the B twice. You can't just you can't just do a quick calculation of the grades. Summer semesters are counted. So if you've always taken summer semesters, the last 2 full-time years is the last 3 semesters. But if you've never taken summer courses, we just take 2 semesters, and that's the key thing. SNS grade or pass-fail grades are not counted. It's only alphanumeric grades that are counted. And a year is considered based on full-time equivalents. So if you've taken 2 part-time sessions, it only counts as 1 full-time. So sometimes if you've been part-time for the last 2 years, that counts as 1 year of full-time equivalents. So there's a lot of particularities of calculations. Before starting, if you have doubts about your average, please consult us. I know I'm a broken record, but every year we get some students who are unfortunately ineligible because they did not take a look too closely at the average calculation.
Thank you, Terry. So that's a lot of information, a lot of complex issues and calculations. As Terry said, we're available to help you with that. And so please contact us, and you'll get the PowerPoint and the recording of this presentation. Okay, let's go back to your Shirk application. Okay, so program of study. So this is a really, really important part of the application. So when you're writing up your program of study, you keep in mind your audience. Okay, so it's not only people in sociology or psychology or political science. Okay, so you have to stay away from jargon because you want to be able to talk to all the people and convince them that you're the right person to be doing this. Okay. Because you have to kind of explain why you should be the one doing this research. Why is it you're the right person? And why is this research timely important? So don't simply say nobody's done this before. It's not a sufficient justification. And bear with me, often what we realize is that, you might think nobody's done this before, but probably somebody's done something similar. So you don't want to insult anybody in terms of that, but it's not a sufficient justification to say nobody's done this. Okay. So why you? What are the skills that you have that are pertinent to undertake this work? So you've got to explain that. So you have to reference anything you've written or your supervisor's work, because, when we're evaluating those proposals, we see who you're working with, and it will explain to us, okay, this person is really with somebody who's really knowledgeable in this field, and it's going to help you. Just don't dump citations, references just to fill up space. We know all the tricks, so don't do that. If your topic is controversial, it's okay to take your position, but you understand that there are different perspectives on the subject. So the components of program of study. So you can begin with an example that demonstrates the importance of the project. Do not save the interesting bits for the end. So, when we're reading those proposals, it's really fascinating to see that, from the first sentences or the first paragraph, we're drawn to the project and we're saying, oh, wow, this is interesting. So the example you choose, it's a way to contextualize your project for the non-specialist. And also it should be interesting enough for committees, the scholars on your committee, to understand what you're talking about, because those members are from a range of disciplines. So this is important for you to take seriously. Thank you, Terry.
Thank you, Sylvie. So we're just going to pinpoint one of the scholarships, the Shirk Scholarship, just to highlight the fact that each of these individual scholarships have different evaluation criteria, and different depending on the degree as well. It has different things they're looking for. As I previously mentioned, for the PhD federal scholarships, the Shirk, the NSERC, and the CIHR, they don't do an average calculation. What they're looking for at the PhD level is more about the research ability and potential and the relevant experience and achievements obtained already in the academia. Meanwhile, at the master's level, you'll see typically the academic excellence has a bigger weight. It's about 50%, because a lot of times it's for students that are coming in from the bachelor's or just starting their master's. So academic success plays a bigger role in that. So it's very important when you're taking a look at these various scholarships, and NSERC and CIHR might be a bit different, to take a look of what they're looking for so you can tailor your application to what they're going to be evaluating. So we just wanted to highlight that fact.
Okay, so when we're looking at the questions that members of the committee might be asking themselves, they're saying, okay, is this project clearly articulated? Is it clear? Do I know what they're talking about? Is it, well articulated? Is it doable, feasible in the allocated period of time? And that's a major issue because, sometimes you bring in a project, it's very broad, and you need to zoom in. You need to kind of make it more specific. And you have to do that certainly for this application. Is it grounded by sound methodology? Is it well defended? Okay, we know that projects change and ideas change, but you have to communicate as though you have a complete handle on what you're doing. I'm not saying you have to be arrogant and say, I know everything, but you have to have a sense of, okay, today, this is the project I'm proposing. Of course, in 8 months' time, there's going to be changes. That's fine. But when you're writing up this proposal, you've got to have a clear handle, or show that you have a clear handle on what you want to do. And what are the questions the committee will ask? They will ask themselves, are you situating yourself in a current theoretical debate or debates in your area? Are you establishing yourself really as an authority on the subject? Okay, within reason, of course. How does your research build or challenge existing knowledge in the field? So you want to provide a positive framing of your contribution, and not saying that you'll be doing everything. Okay, so it's very important to do that. Section 3, the description of the project. So the description of your project must be concise given the limited space you have. And, you can't play with that. You won't be able to continue writing if you've reached that limit. You should outline your contribution to existing debates literature. You should describe how you actually intend to carry out this project. Even if you're not entirely sure, you need to communicate that as much as possible. And the description of the project is really the most important section. The methodology. Okay, so it is often the neglected area. Okay, and this can be really a problem for your application. Ideally, the methodology section will help to demonstrate that you have given serious thought to how you are going to execute your project, because the how question is important. So what's your main approach to mobilize that you're going to be mobilizing for this research? What kind of methods you're going to be using? Interviews, those kinds of things. So you need to explain that very clearly. So you're doing interviews. How are you going to analyze them? What are the key texts that are going to be guiding your analysis? So, but of course, you might be using other methods, but I'm just giving the example of the qualitative interviews. Barry?
Yes, sorry, I was trying to answer the chat question at the same time. I got caught. So we wanted to give an overview of some of these applications. And Laurel and Michelle, I do see your questions in the chat. I'll have to answer them later on just to keep the flow, but I have not forgotten your questions. So we wanted to give a brief overview. Some of these scholarships have so many nitty-gritty particularities. And it's just, we're not going to go through these points, but sometimes they have different word limits. Sometimes they have different criteria of what exactly they're looking for, in the methodology or different things. It's very important to pay attention to the details in these applications. So the links we'll be providing where all the scholarships are stored have direct links to the different funding agencies with usually a clear application guide. But a lot of these are a couple pages long, so it's very important to pay attention to the details. They'll tell you exactly what they want in the second section, how they want the categories divided and referenced, and just different particularities. So like word limits, everything like that, and we'll touch upon other criteria that they have that can render your file ineligible, or sometimes they won't let you submit. So it's very important. The key point that we want to hold on is to make sure that you're looking at those individual application guides for these scholarships to make sure that you're respecting the norms that they're looking for. Like I said, our hands are kind of tied in these situations. And especially for the doctoral, the doctoral federal competition that goes to national competition, if you're not respecting their guidelines, that's the first thing that they'll take a look at, and they'll exclude your file almost automatically. So it's very important to pay attention to the details. A key thing to remember: have you proofread several times your application? Keep in mind, you're going to have a bunch of professors internally here at the university, and then potentially national scholarships for the Shirk PhD looking at these things. And they have very little patience for poorly written applications. So it's very important to take the time to proofread. My experience when I'm writing multi-page things, and I've looked at it 1,000 times, is I get blinded to what's directly in front of my face. So asking a friend or a colleague, and especially because a lot of these competitions are going to be evaluated by professors who are not necessarily in the field, make sure your jargon is open to everybody and something that people in other fields will be able to understand, because a Shirk PhD can go up to national competition. It could be someone, if you're a psychology student, it could be someone from sociology or different things like that that's evaluating. Even internally within the faculty, that happens. So it's very important that you try to keep it. You don't want to put it down to like high school level, but you want to make sure that you're using jargon that people can easily understand. I can't stress enough the referees. Your file is not complete till we receive both or sometimes three reference letters. Asking them the 2-3 days beforehand is a surefire sign of not succeeding. Making sure they're willing to do your reference, B, they've got the time, and C, they actually follow through on it. So a lot of these portals, and I don't know what the new OGS portal is going to have, it usually gives you an idea of what's completed and what's not. So you have an opportunity. But make sure you have someone reliable and someone who knows you. Have you ensured that the project is eligible for funding? Ensure that you've read the guidelines. A lot of times your supervisor or your future potential supervisor or someone that you know really well, if you're a bachelor student that you're considering doing this, some departments, the MA coordinator or the PhD coordinator is more than willing to meet with you. If you approach them early enough, they can guide you in this thing. The majority of our applications for the the federal funding agencies is usually Shirk, the SSHRC, but we do have some that have scientific research, and it's predominantly in psychology. Some of our psychology apply in Shirk, some of them NSERC, some of them CIHR, and it's usually based on their supervisors, so check with them. These are the little housekeeping frequently made mistakes. So when you're on the Shirk or the NSERC or the CIHR portal, either for the master's or the PhD, one of the first questions when you're applying is it asks, are you applying to an institution that has a quota? So if you say no, you go into the general national competition at a lower level and you are potentially disadvantaged. The University of Ottawa does have a quota for the federal funding agencies, the Shirk, the NSERC, and the CIHR. So you answer, yes, I'm applying to an institution with a quota. Other reminders. So a lot of these scholarships, and sometimes they use different bureaucratic language. Sometimes it's like, how many months have you been in the master's program, or how many months have you been in the PhD programs, or sometimes it's how many terms. When you're counting the months, a semester is 4 months. So if you're applying December 1st for OGS and you just started your program, do not just write 3, because a lot of times it says as of December 31st, so it's 4. Your number should technically be a multiple of 4. So sometimes people, well, my summer course was 2.5 months. What it appears as in the transcript is you're registered as a spring summer semester, and Shirk and NSERC will count that as 4 months. So it's multiples of 4. This is very important because it does, make some people think they're eligible when they're not, and it can cause problems later on in terms of your inaccurate information in your application. So multiples of 4. If you're having difficulty reading some of this bureaucratic language that the government people put together, that's what we're here for. Either in person, email, Teams. We'll meet with you. We'll take a quick look. We'll do a calculation for you and help you out. This is where it gets really fun, and not being serious about that. This is sarcastic. They have the most minute technical details sometimes. Maximum file size. A lot of students have problems saving things. So if you're waiting till the last day to try to come up with uploading your transcript and you don't realize that for some reason the way you saved it is too high, it won't let you upload it and then won't let you complete your file. So make sure you're respecting the file size. Page margins will sometimes not let you upload files. So key thing is apply not 24 hours before the deadline. Try to make sure that you're respecting all the guidelines. Single space rules, point size rules, margin rules. Each individual competition has its own particularities. It is your responsibility to make sure that you're respecting those regulations. So you can't just simply take your OGS application and use it for your Shirk applications. You got to make sure that you're adapting to the needs. This seems like a minute thing, but it can be time consuming, and you make sure that you just have your ducks in a row because you don't want to have issues submitting your applications or have a random disqualification for a national competition because you're not respecting their norms or their guidelines. Again, I'm just a messenger. I'm not making these rules, but you have to respect them because our hands are tied. So key resources is, and again, we'll be providing the link. All the scholarships can be found at the graduate studies, the Cabinet of Graduate Studies. They have an awards section and they have all the direct links to the individual scholarships and our internal procedures and stuff. So they oversee this process. We've had this video for a few years and it's a student perspective of the thought process in terms of preparing their applications. We'll be sharing this YouTube link because it's more of a student perspective versus an administrator's perspective. So it gives you an idea of just tips and strategies to reflect on while you're writing this process. I think I've said it a few times. Don't hesitate to come see us or email us. Again, emailing me might not be the quickest way to get a response because my team is a lot quicker than me. Email us at scsgrad@uottawa.ca. We can set up a meeting. We can take a look at your file, and we can give you the best advice on how to proceed. And yeah, and I just wanted to take a moment to thank. I think I've seen some of them answering the questions in the chat. We've got the whole team working on this because this is a great opportunity for students to have great funding. And I just wanted to take a special moment to thank Adam, Olivia, and Audrey on preparing this PowerPoint. And they're often the ones answering the questions in the email as well. And then, yeah.
Thank you, Terry. So I hope this presentation was helpful. I know there's probably a lot of questions. I don't know if there's questions on the chat right now or if you want to raise your hand.
If I don't see any hands raised, so I'm gonna, just for the sake of the the recording. Wow. I'm gonna say some of these questions out loud, and I'll answer. I think there's one or two that are still not answered because I think my team's. Oh, Rasha, I'll let you ask your question first then, and then I'll go through the chat and answer all the questions.
You prefer that I put my questions in the chat. If you prefer to respond to it as we go or by email, I don't mind that. I don't know.
You can ask me. I'll do my best to answer it.
I did a qualifying year, and then I was sent an offer by the university for my master's. So basically, I did two semesters and 3 classes in a spring semester. So how that make me eligible? And the other question about the references criteria.
Yeah, I see the reference question. In terms of qualifying, they are considered like an undergraduate course. I won't be able to tell your eligibility without seeing your transcript. So you can write to us to SCS Grad and we can do we could do a meeting and we could take a look at the particularities of your calculations because it can get tricky with a qualifying. So I could take a look. We send us an email. We can take a look at your eligibility for that. They are considered as undergraduate courses, and we would just have to see how your last year and your previous last year would be calculated based on these rules. And I would actually need to see the transcripts. In terms of the references, take a look at the funding agencies. What I've heard in the past is, especially for these things, the priority goes to academic references. They're looking at research potential. They're looking at previous academic experience. Unless you've got an expert in the field that might not be an academic, but who's like a top of the field, then that might be applicable. But a work reference who can't necessarily comment on your academic excellence or your research potential would be a disadvantage to you. It would, and I think some of them do require that they need to be academic references, but I strongly, I can't insist enough that it should be academic because it will put you at a severe disadvantage.
Okay, and what about an academic outside Canada? Because my research might be concentrated that is outside, and I do have an academic reference who is a professor in a university at that work.
So international references are accepted as long as they are written in English or French. So they, especially at the federal, because this application can be submitted in French or English, they all get treated the same. But supporting documents need to be in one of the two official languages. And same thing for the OGS. Okay. I see another hand raised. Chrisanne, am I pronouncing that right?
Hi, Terry. Yes, you're pronouncing it right. Thank you. And honestly, please stop me if I'm asking the wrong person. I just couldn't figure this out on my own. I just have a question about one of the University of Ottawa internal bursaries. The School of Social Work has an inclusion bursary. But weirdly enough, every time I go through the link of financial aid and awards, I can't seem to find the link to apply to that. Do you know who I should talk to about that?
Right to SCS grad to my attention, and I got contacts for that. Yes, but
Okay,
right to us. I might need I might be a day or two to answer, but there might be a reason, but I can get you the answer.
Okay, thank you so much.
No problem. All right, so so we answered a bunch of these questions. I think the first one that I saw that was unanswered was Michelle at 1:53 p.m. Can you change your major research project completely once you've received the scholarship? So especially students at the bachelor's level and sometimes even the first semester or master's level, it can change as long as it doesn't drastically change to a whole other like outside of this field of social sciences. And like if you applied for your Shirk and suddenly you're doing a purely scientific, that could be problematic. Minor variations are expected. It happens as long as you don't completely change it completely. So, but in those instances, speak with your supervisors and they can guide you through that process. It even changes for professors when they apply for fundings. I'm sure anybody who applied in 2019 probably had to change a bit their orientation of their research following the pandemic. Change happens as long as it doesn't change into like a completely different field of study like science and or the health one. So hopefully that answered your question, Michelle. Laurel, I think someone answered your question. Yes, I see that. Violetta, referees have a PhD degree or being within the academia. Usually, especially for PhD scholarships, they're looking for references from other PhDs. Again, it's just to increase your chances. So the weight of an evaluator that has a PhD holds more weight. So as to take that into consideration, unless they're for some reason an expert in the field, like a top-notch expert that doesn't have a PhD, which is possible, that could be into consideration. But typically, a PhD referee will hold more weight. Will the recording be sent to everyone via email? Yep, not just those who are SVP, but everyone who got the invite. We're just gonna send them everything, and the PowerPoint as well. I'm sure that got answered Oh, Adam already answered Violetta. So I think I've answered all the questions in the chat. Raise your hand if I missed one. Raise your hand if you still don't know. Know something about something. Wow, that was clear. The key thing is ask a lot of questions early. Like I said, later on in the end of November, we get inundated with questions and we can't necessarily answer them all quickly. Our team's here. Email us, drop in at FSS 3021. I see a question. The name popped up and disappeared.
No, it's just a thank you.
Okay.
So I just
No,
want to
I see a hand up. Sorry, Sylvie, there's a hand up from Mamdu. Yes.
Yes, hello. Thank you for this. I'd like to ask if I'm in the first year of my PhD program, and if I only have one referee to submit a reference letter, so it is not gonna work, right? Okay.
It can be problematic. So I assume you have a supervisor if you're in the PhD program. It might be best. He might have an idea of a strategy of who you can reach out to. They're used to this kind of situation. They might think, oh, you took a course with this one, you might be able to do that.
Okay.
If you're in the PhD program, maybe there's someone at the master's level, wherever you did your master's, who might be able to provide.
Yes, my supervisor at master level might work for this.
Okay, so.
Yeah.
But you got to be strategic when it comes to like everything is you're trying to distinguish yourself from other candidates. So if you have a supervisor, if you have a prof that if you're at the bachelor's level that you have a good relationship with, get their advice and strategize with them the best way to highlight your abilities.
Okay, so being in a first year give me a good chance, or should I wait for the second year to apply to let the professor know me more and the department know me more? What do you think? What is your advice here?
I think the first slide that we started on with Sylvie was it's good practice. So I think it is time consuming, but it is good practice to find a way to do it. Students in their first years do get these scholarships. But worst case is it is a good practice if you're unsuccessful and it develops it and it helps you just for your thesis. Sylvie wants to interject.
But I would add, you have to have your project is ready. When we went through the list of, the proposal, what you have to write. When you're writing it, you talk to your supervisor because it might, I had this situation with a student. I thought she was not ready yet for the first year to apply. So she worked on it and she now knows a lot more where she's going. So it depends, when you're filling out the things, you'll see, okay, am I ready? But if you have some kind of sense that you're ready and your supervisor says you're ready, I would say go for it.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
So normally first year PhD can have this. Okay,
yeah.
That's perfect. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks so much.
And I would like to end by saying, just plan your work because I know you're very busy. It's the start of term. You have courses, you have laundry, you have parties to go to. So plan your life and you say, okay, Thursday, I'm going to do this. Friday, I'm going to do this. So, like a countdown, it really will help you if you plan your stuff properly. And I would repeat as well, to give yourself time to write this up, but also give your referees time to read your proposal and comment it, and especially your supervisor, and give them time to look at it and make comments to you. That's going to be very, very useful.
Okay, that's perfect. Yeah, thank you.
And I would say that to everyone, not just to you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you all have a great term. We're so happy to see you on campus. It's really nice to see this bunch of people, very happy to be on campus, and we're here to help you if you need some help. So I want to thank Terry and all our team at the Office of the Graduate Studies. And if you don't have any more questions, we'll leave it at that. Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks.